I'm David, and I'm going to be reading a snippet of The Labyrinthine Mire by A.G. Naylor to you. Now, that's kind of a confusing title, so let's break it down. Labyrinthine means being of or like a labyrinth. But what's a labyrinth? A labyrinth is kind of like a maze. And a mire, what is that? A mire is kind of like a swamp. So, this title means the swamp that was kind of like a maze, the Labyrinthine Mire. Now, this is the third installment in the Jin and Fortis stories, which follows a young farm boy named Jin going on adventures with a great warrior named Fortis. It started in Slayer, was continued in Dangerous Darkness, but now we're going to be focused on Chapter 4 of the Labyrinthine Mire. This chapter follows the story of a woodpecker that guides people who are in peril or lost to safety. So let's delve into Chapter 4 of The Labyrinthine Mire by A.G. Naylor. One day, when Kenway Haka was a young boy, his mother had sent him into the nearby woods to gather some mushrooms. While he was returning home, his basket full, he heard screams of terror and pain coming from the direction of his peaceful, idyllic village. Dropping the basket, Kenway raced towards his home, driven by concern for his family and friends. Kenway emerged from the woods at the far end of the clearing wherein the village was located. He arrived just in time to see the thatched roof of his family's home put to the torch by one of the painted invaders. The remainder of the village was similarly aflame, and the ground was littered with the bodies of the villagers. Kenway cried out in terror as he stood there, seeing the total destruction of all that he had ever known or loved. The scream drew the attention of two of the attackers. They ran to where Kenway was standing, intent on killing him so that there would not be anyone who could bear witness to what had occurred. Kenway noticed the two men heading his way, and this was enough for him to regain his senses. He turned and ran into the woods, and since he was very knowledgeable of them, he was able to select a good spot in which to hide from his pursuers. He laid there in the thick brush, curled up against a rotting log, listening to the cruel men work back and forth, searching for him. Their loud steps and thrashing about as they kept furiously thrusting their bloody blades into any potential hiding spot that they encountered masked his heavy breathing. Kenway thought that his escape would prove to be successful, since the two men seeking him seemed to be working their way from him. But his hopes were quickly dashed when one of his two pursuers let out an ear-splitting whistle to the rest of the attackers, signaling them to come and aid in the search for the potential witness. Fear filled the young boy, and he drew his knees to his chest and curled himself into a ball. He began to mumble prayers, beseeching an unseen higher power to come to his assistance and save him from these killers who had taken everything from him. Almost immediately, the desperate pleas from the innocent boy were answered. The woods, in fact the entire area, became covered with an almost impenetrable fog. Such was the thickness of the fog that the men stopped what they were doing and began calling to each other. There was fear and panic in their voices, for none of them had ever seen anything like it before. "Get some torches," boomed a loud, commanding voice. "We shall make sure that we find this one. It will be nightfall soon, and we have to make sure that no one lives to tell what happened here. Once you get a torch, start making your way through the woods. If you do not have one, move slowly and silently." Kenway sat silently, trying to control his breathing, for it seemed to him that it could be heard by everyone nearby. He had no idea how he was going to evade these determined men. Despair began to overcome him as he slowly lost hope that he would live to see another day. He wondered to himself if a fog were all that the gods were capable of sending to him to save his life. It was just then that Kenway heard the rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker. The knocking sound was deep and powerful as it pierced the fog that incredibly had managed to grow even thicker as the day wore on. The tapping not only filled the woods, but it also gave Kenway a deep sense of being safe and comforted. It was comparable to how he felt when his mother would hug him when he was a child. Those hugs would help him feel protected and loved. An idea began to grow in the back of Kenway's mind that the unseen bird would guide him to safety, much like a lighthouse serves as a beacon to ships at sea, so that they may know the locations of deadly shoals and rocks. Kenway knew that the men were still out there and were determined to hunt him down and kill him. He knew that the men without torches were the ones that were the most dangerous. This was due to the fact that the men with torches were visible, while the other men were neither moving nor visible, and waited silently for him to make the slightest bit of noise to indicate where their prey was located. Tap, tap, tap. Moving as quietly as he could, Kenway began to head in the direction of the sound made by the unseen bird. He had not gone more than 10 paces when the tapping sound stopped. The sudden silence filled Kenway with fear and doubt. How was he going to escape the situation? Had he been imagining that the woodpecker had been sent to lead him to safety? Tap, tap, tap. There it was, thought Kenway, feeling a warm wave of relief wash over him. But now it was coming from a different direction. This confused him at first, but he reasoned that if he were supposed to follow the sound, then he would go wherever it led him. With the coming of night, it became even more difficult to move silently through the brush and trees. At least during the daytime hours, there was enough light that he could see the larger obstacles such as tree trunks and clumps of bushes. But objects like fallen logs and short ferns blended into the ground and caused him to stumble more than once. Now, though, the woods were a deep black and filled with hazards that could entangle him or block his path. This was forcing Kenway to move so slowly and deliberately that it seemed to him as though he were not advancing at all. The tapping stopped, and so did the accompanying feeling of warmth and safety. This had happened every time that the woodpecker's signal ceased, and Kenway was surprised how deeply the overwhelming sensation of being alone affected him. Kenway took advantage of the stoppage to see if he could locate any of the marauders that were carrying torches. He could see some moving lights in the distance, made hazy by the thick, persistent fog, but it was difficult to determine just how far away they were. He drew some small comfort from the fact that they were not very near. It was the knowledge of the unseen hunters that, unknown in number and location, was maddening. Tap, tap, tap. Relief and joy filled Kenway when he heard the welcome beacon. This time it came from a different direction. Slowly, Kenway stood and began the laborious and nerve-wracking process of making his way toward the beckoning sound. He would make his way by slowly raising his right leg a few inches and slowly extending it, ready to stop the forward motion at the slightest resistance. He would then lower the foot as gently as he could in order to prevent stepping on a dead twig or dry leaves and having the resulting sound betray his position. He would then repeat the process with his left foot, pausing to listen for any reaction to his movement. All the time that he was doing this, Kenway was focused on the tapping sound from his unseen guide, the mysterious woodpecker. This exhausting pattern was repeated constantly through the long night and into the following day and night. The tapping would start, and Kenway would make his way towards it, and when it stopped, so would he. All the while, the preternatural thick fog showed no inclination of thinning. Dawn of the second morning found Kenway standing at the edge of a clearing. after finally emerging from the fog. Before him was a building that appeared to be an inn of some sort. He could see the people of the inn as they began to start their daily activities. Kenway was both physically and emotionally drained from the ordeal of the past 2 days. He found some untapped reserves of energy and stumbled his way to the nearby building. The exhausted boy reached for the handle on the door, and then everything went black. When he awoke, Kenway found himself on a wooden bench in front of a stone fireplace which held a small, comforting blaze. Near his head was a small table, upon which was a bowl of thick soup, bread, and 2 mugs of cider. Overcome with a need to satisfy this tremendous hunger and thirst, Kenway ate like one possessed. It was only after eating. He had not bothered to check his surroundings the entire time that he was gulping down the meal that had been set before him, that Kenway noticed the 2 people watching him. Kenway thanked them profusely for the food and drink, and then proceeded to tell them all that happened to him. His small audience listened with rapt attention and expressed deep concern when he described what had happened to his village. Kenway told them all about the strange woodpecker and how it had guided him and kept him from harm. When he was finished, the innkeeper and his wife looked at each other with knowing smiles. Kenway noticed this and looked at them inquisitively. The innkeeper did not answer the unspoken question. He just raised his arm and pointed to a large wooden carving of a bird, a woodpecker, like the one that aided Kenway during his escape from the brutal marauders. "Sakegi," said the innkeeper. "He protects those in the wood who need it." So I hope you enjoyed that little story from the Labyrinthine Mire about Kenway being led to safety by Sakegi, the woodpecker. Have a good day.